like to call this meeting back to order. It is 9:12. I would like to make a motion to move an agenda item so that staff can go home up on the agenda. And it is, what's the number again? 11A to now. Is that, okay. So I'd like to make a motion for that.
I'll second it.
Okay, can you read that motion back?
Yes. President Rose, I move to move up 11A, consider update on health effects of 5G communication system and future regulations. Requested by trustee Arenta.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now take up agenda item 11A.
So I did provide a memo in the packet, and so just to clarify, there was two requests. One was on health of 5G, the other one is on what regulations the state has imposed or federal has imposed on our ability to regulate them. So from the zoning and planning standpoint, I'm more able to answer the second part of that question. Director Ann Christensen did provide her information as to what she found on the health impacts of 5G. I will just say that 5G is not rolled out in Wisconsin yet, let alone Milwaukee or Shorewood. So knowing whether or not those impacts are here, I think has been discussed in the community. I've been informed by every person I've talked to that it's actually not taking place quite yet. It's only happening in 3 markets, and it's Houston and Indianapolis is what I remember. There's a third place as well. So the health impacts I think are still unknown as that goes, just because it's so new and it hasn't been in communities yet. So in terms of the 5G health that it's agendized as, I just want to make that clear that we don't really have much on that. But Ann Christensen did provide her contact information and various websites just indicating what we do and can find out. So.
Barb, sorry to interrupt, but at the ICC, the county person is the lead on the 5G. She came to brief all the municipalities, all 19 of us, and I think she has a better handle on time frame and also the health impacts. It's the short microwave. They do have some information on it, but she has not taken the county has not taken a formal stance either way at this point. So maybe just finding out, I'll let you finish, but I just wanted to reference her.
I'd be happy for either her or I to follow up with you to get that contact information, just because there really isn't much that we have to reference on it. I think the broader question, however, is that there isn't much that we can regulate on it either. So the state statutes that I referenced in here, to me, are pretty clear that we cannot, prohibit these from coming into the community currently under the current statute, just based on the radio frequency signal strength. So the health impacts, I think, are a larger question. What locally we can do here is unfortunately not much in terms of how we cite them. So they do require conditional use permits, so they do run through the Plan Commission, but the Plan Commission is limited in what they can prohibit or regulate on those. The primary reason of running it through the Plan Commission as a conditional use is just that the neighbors get notified that it is coming. We did have some issues with the recent approvals that the neighbors didn't feel as though they were informed that it was coming to their neighborhood. And so maintained as a conditional use at least does provide that level of communication. Unfortunately, there isn't much that we can do once it does come to Plan Commission.
I thought there was a federal law that prohibits us from any approvals on 5G. It's a federal law that I was told.
We cannot prohibit it, correct.
Okay. So even Plan Commission can't say no.
Correct.
So you're just running it through just to say we're providing notice.
Right, because
Which is odd.
well, and I guess that's currently within the zoning chapter, they are conditional uses, and so when these changes have come into play, we've never modified our zoning ordinance to get rid of this conditional use, primarily for the fact of communication to neighbors. So the 5 that were recently installed, there was a question as to whether or not they were notified properly, and my take on it was there could have been more, but we could not have stopped it. So there was a balance or a policy question there. Residents they want to know, but it's also needs to be made very clear to them that we currently can't stop it. And so when those residents have come into me, I've guided them either to state legislators or the league or someone that's working on it, from a larger perspective. Understand that a Plan Commission under current cannot really do much.
Is there a better way rather than setting the residents up for failure to come to a meeting that can't prohibit it, is there a better way to just have staff administer a notification to the surrounding, however many feet surrounding the area? Does it have to go to plan commission? I just feel like when the public comes to
Under the
their
current
input,
zoning-
we're
under
gonna
the current
have
zoning
every
ordinance, it
time,
does.
it's gonna be the same conversation.
Yeah, in the current zoning ordinance, it does. It's very clear that it does go there. The problem is the plan commission can't do
Can't do
much.
anything,
So
I don't wanna set us up for failure, like, making the residents feel like they can have a safer reason when they can't.
I just feel like the residents are gonna have that discussion either way, and I'd rather have them have that discussion in front of policymakers than just staff. In that respect, because I'll be frank, they don't like hearing it from staff. They feel as though, I'm not
I
giving them
understand.
their chance to, publicly express their opinions on it. So I've been fine with having the public hearing and having them voice their opinion, but then being very clear as to what we can and can't.
But we don't have any yet. So I think, so my only, as chair of plan commission, if all of a sudden they pop up in, I'm sorry, trust me, but they pop up in, in Wisconsin or in Shorewood, all of a sudden you see 10. And now every single plan commission, you're gonna have people coming to say the same thing, and we're gonna have to keep saying to them, and there's nothing we can do. Anyways, it's not, we're not there yet, but I do feel it would, if we could tweak that process, it may be better. Trustee Menta.
Okay, so is it a state regulation that prohibits us from regulating these at all, or is it federal?
It's both. I'm most familiar with the state. The federal one just went into effect, and I think this federal one, and Nathan, maybe you can correct me if I'm misspeaking, the federal one largely relates to public right-of-way.
Yeah.
And the state
The
one,
short answer is it's pretty hard to do anything about it. There's,
The county's.
you're not gonna be able to reject it based upon health concern, So,
Wait, I haven't finished. So if we were to petition the state to allow us to regulate it, it would not, we would still be subject to federal, so is that correct? Or is the federal just related to health, or is the federal related to everything?
no, it sort of acts, the federal legislation sort of acts as a bulldozer to take down a lot of the regulatory framework at the local level, especially in the right of ways, and then they're called co-locations, which attach onto existing structures such as light poles or telephone poles. And what they do, there's some testing at the federal level as to how much radiation and type of emissions these things put out. And as long as you fall within, as long as you keep it between the fences in terms of what the feds say you can and can't do, it's pretty hard to do anything about it at the local level.
One suggestion would be, the ICC would be the best way to lobby the state, because all of us had that concern, all 19 municipalities have the same concern, and I know the county's taking the lead to try to, so if Shorewood decides at some point the board wants to entertain, a resolution or whatever, but I think the next step would be to bring that to the ICC. And
Well, the
have
point
them-
is there's federal, it doesn't matter, because even if we go to the ICC and go to the state, and the state it doesn't matter, because it's federal regulation. So that was the point of
You
the
could send it to
conversation we
Gwen
just
Moore.
had.
I'm just saying that we also, the ICC contacts Gwen Moore and our federal representatives as well. It's just a way, it's just an avenue to get that out there. Trustee Warren?
I was just going to say, I think the conversation would pass it by a little bit, but I was just going to say, so if they do come to planning commission, that basically, unless we go the ICC route, our message is going to be contact your state and federal legislators and express to them your
And county.
concerns. I mean, that-
in my opinion, it's just been a good education method, so that when it gets to people before it's put up in their neighborhood. So the problem was the pole came up and then it was like,
But you could do
who
that
was this,
staff
where did this come
administrator.
from?
You could do that at planning commission, or you don't have to go to planning commission to notify the neighbors, it can be administratively done. Because if they come to oppose it.
Correct, if we modify the current code, it could be
If
given
you
to
just send a
staff.
letter, that there's nothing, here's the state regulation, here's the fed regulation, and we're providing notice. I just feel like you're saying, once it hits Wisconsin, or our village, it's gonna set us up to be in the position that you're in as staff, like the planning commissioners, because we're not, it's gonna be the same conversation over and over and over.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, the suggested motion that I kind of struggle with, because I'm not sure exactly what the intent of, I know it's a conversation piece, but If this is something that we want to research, I would suggest giving it to the plan commission to research, just because it currently is within their purview of conditional use permits. Understanding that there's not much you can do about it currently, I don't know priority-wise how much, and I'll work with the president of the plan commission, obviously, to prioritize that, but I would think this would be kind of their discussion point at the current, whether or not they feel as though they want to keep it that way or modify it so that when it does come, it's not as, onerous on their agendas.
I would prefer that we at least have one discussion at plan commission.
I know Rebecca's planning to talk about this in the next village manager's memo, but if you could put something on the website, then that might be helpful for people. You could just refer them to the planning department and have all this information, which is really great, and thank you for putting this all together. But you could have, and you have all the links, so you could have it all there, and I think that would be useful to have on the website.
I didn't read the suggested motion, so what does it say?
Is there a motion?
I didn't know if there was supposed to be one, but I did put one in there if I have a memo here. It was to defer to the plan commission for discussion.
You could also add in and also list it on the website.
But is the right, I guess my question is that the right thing to do to defer it to, or refer it to the planning commission? Or is it should it just, because it's the same answer, like even if it's referred to planning commission, there's not.
It's changing an ordinance, so right now it's a conditional use, and that conditional use is seen by plan commission. So it would be the plan commission giving us a recommendation back to the board saying, yeah, we don't want to see these, or we want to see these, and so just getting their input of, do they think an ordinance change would be helpful?
Right, we could have a conversation of, you can't, and I think they probably had the conversation, probably several times since change in 2013, I believe. But the conversation would be, this is what you can't regulate, do you still want to see them, or do you want to give someone else the authority to approve or review them, so.
I mean, you
Or
don't need
notify.
a motion from the board to bring that to planning commission though. I mean, you guys can just do it. I mean, I don't feel the need for us to, I was asked for the information, just to have the information, and if we can just put it on the website so it's publicly available, I'm good with that.
And I'll just request as the chair that we, at some point, put on the agenda for plan commission. Doesn't matter the timing for me, as long as it's before it happens. When they start showing up. Anybody else? And thanks to trustee Menta for bringing that forward.
Sure. Thank you, Bart.
Thank you, Director Bart. And you are excused. All right, so our next agenda item will be on tax.
Yes, we are moving back to public hearings. There are none tonight. We'll move on to new business. Consider award of contract 2019 sidewalk program, meeting number 3.
Okay, who's here to speak on the sidewalk program?
I can.
Okay.
This is simply your award of contract for the program. As you see, we had two bidders on the project. The low bid is Forward Contractors. They are qualified.
And this is just for the sidewalk repairs to actually do the work?
Yes,
And we do this every other year?
correct.
And when is the RFP, how long's the contract?
I'm sorry,
How long would this be our provider?
for this year's project.
Oh, just this year, so it's not.
It's a construction project. So,
Oh, okay, so it's not just like the program for 3 years, you're gonna
correct.
handle this?
Yep, we would do that on an engineering side, but never on the construction
Okay.
side.
Does anyone have any questions about that? Go ahead, Lee.
It looks like adding this up and adding the 83 cents, it's gonna be about $250 per square.
That's what we're estimating, yes.
Ouch, I'll just say ouch.
I don't disagree with you. That's been right in the ballpark from the last couple of projects.
We had a conversation earlier, I don't remember who was here at the board, who wasn't, but on the sidewalk shaving. And I just want to repeat during this conversation, other municipalities use shaving to assist the homeowner from having to replace the square when it comes up every 10 years. So instead of 10-year replacement, it would extend the life to say 14 or 15 years. And so from what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, we don't use it that way. We come to that quadrant and say, oh, okay, it's been 10 years, and or whatever the time frame is, and now can we shave any of them instead? And so I would really like to reevaluate that to understand how we're getting a benefit from, like, if I was just thought it was on a case-by-case basis, it didn't have to be in that quadrant after the 10-year mark. It was more of, can we shave that down so we can get another 5 years out of that pavement? So it's a rethink of our program entirely. And we kind of just added it in, it's so minimal. I don't know that it's gonna make any impact having that grinder, a small one, but again, the way it was, we just didn't reprogram it to incorporate it the way other municipalities have. And so I don't know how we get that one day back on the agenda. I know it probably can't happen this year. I don't know if this is the right spot, but if we're gonna do sidewalk shaving, which we've talked about for a couple of years, and residents brought it to our attention, so the Conservation Committee, we really should be using it to get the maximum benefit of sidewalk shaving, which is, in my opinion, it's at the 8-year mark, or whenever that could use a shaving to extend it past that 10 years. Because then you're saving the residents money. I mean, you're
Well-
helping them not have to replace on a 10-year basis.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I wouldn't say that we're absolutely not doing that. In each geographic area that we've identified for sidewalk programs, there are concrete stones that span 100 years, and I'm not exaggerating on their age. I mean, we can go in any given area of the village and we can find sidewalk sections that were poured within the last 5 years, and we can find some that, are 70, 80, 90 years old. So, every time we do a sidewalk program, we have the benefit of extending the life of sidewalk stones
In that quadrant.
in that quadrant.
Right, so but if there's another, so I guess, and I understand what you're saying, what I'm saying is, when we do sidewalk shaving, if it's in a different quadrant, we shouldn't have to wait how many years does it take to get to that quadrant?
That's certainly something we could look at. I think that might fall into one of the buckets we talked about a little earlier is, how do we increase this service, add this program, and work it into our current infrastructure schedule? That would be the discussion, in my opinion.
I think it's the evaluation by the engineer, right? To say, if you did it every other year, just like you are, you would, instead of looking at one quadrant, you say, is there any candidates for shaving in the village? Anyways, I don't know where that falls, but I would like to look at that and understand why other municipalities are doing it differently. Any other discussion? Trustee Moore?
Maybe a minor point, but I'm just trying to reconcile them in mind. So the contract award is $235,530. The budget estimate is $225,000. Where is that extra $10,000 plus overrun?
It's all assessments.
It's all assessments, there's no run.
Yes,
And
it's
just to be
separate.
completely clear and transparent, that's an estimated contract amount. The quantities for the purpose of bidding were estimated. We will not have actual quantities until the field evaluation is done.
Got it, okay.
And I do know people have been seeing those O's marked, and there was a lot, so we have a new engineer, right, correct? And so, can you just explain what's going on, just so we understand how to respond?
So we do have a new village engineer. And, despite the fact that we have some very specific criteria, everybody has a little bit different take on how they're applied. The employee from Strand that is doing the sidewalk evaluation applied it very strictly, and very absolutely, we'll just say. Except the criteria is pretty specific, but that said, there is still room for interpretation in the application. And in some other years, we have not been perhaps applied quite as strictly as this young man did. So we're kind of going back and explaining, some of the things, and we are doing a reevaluation of of the areas that have already been marked.
And is any of those candidates first shaving?
Yeah, that's being considered.
Okay.
Yep. Based on the criteria you approved on April 1st.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Do you want me to put that in like a future agenda item to look at the program, or you, I don't know.
It is one of the criteria that we look at.
No, I'm talking about just looking at other municipalities and how they use sidewalk shaving.
Yes, that would be a two-term.
Okay.
I'll move award of contract for 2019 sidewalk replacement program to Shorewood contractors in the amount of $235,530.00.
Second that motion.
A motion and a second, any further discussion? Want to read that back and we'll take a vote?
To award a contract for the 2019 sidewalk replacement program to Ford contractors in the amount of $235,530.00.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Should motions like that say approximately, because you had mentioned it's not really 250? That's a big estimate.
It's on a pro rata basis, right? I mean, it's defined by the number of.
By the unit
Maybe
prices.
better just
Squares, right?
It's unit, I mean, you could, in the past, I think there have been times when we, not a lawyer, but we made reference in the motion with using the phrase a unit price contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters because that would probably be helpful for the minutes, though, at least then someone
Right.
reading it would understand.
Because
If you
this
want
is
to
250 and then they compare it and it
Right,
says
right.
400 and you're like, what? It's not what the board approved, so anyways.
I can make sure that future motions include that language.
Okay, thank you. All right, that was a 5-0 vote, correct? Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, Leanne.
9B, consider resolution 2019-11 related to the replacement of sidewalks and carriage walks in 2019, meeting number 3.
Leanne?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm making unit price notes. This is a resolution that is required under state statute that you're authorizing the charge of this work as a special assessment to the abutting property. It is identical, with the exception of the dates and the signature lines, to every motion or every resolution related to sidewalk.
Do you need to
Assessment.
incorporate in this resolution now sidewalk shading because that's not specially assessed?
No. This is only for work that is being assessed.
Okay. All right. Trustee Menta?
Looking at the amount of sidewalk replacements that are being identified, and I know we don't have a final number yet, but, some of these assessments could be like over $2,000 for people, and maybe even up to $3,000.
Right.
It did occur to me whether we want to set a maximum, but a maximum for the assessment, or at least if it's over $2,000 to give people 3 years, to break it up over 3 years rather than just 2 years. I mean, I just, if you assess $2,500, and so that's $1,250 per year. I don't know, it's hard to tell because we don't really know, but, and I know, I don't know when Strand is looking at it, or when you guys are going out and reviewing, if there's, because there's some that have like every single one marked,
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. I understand that, trust me, is not a conversation we like having with residents either when they call to ask that question. I will say this, just for consideration, state statutes require us to keep our contract within 10%, 15% of the quantity that was outlined in the bid. As it stands now, with what I believe I know is marked, we are not gonna fall within that threshold. So we are gonna have to ratchet back
Okay,
what is marked so that we can stay in compliance with that state requirement.
If the contract didn't specify 250,000 and it just did a unit price, do you still have that problem?
Yes.
Why?
Oh, if it didn't, I'm sorry, did you say if it,
If it didn't, so in other words, by saying 250,000, you're saying you can't go over or below that a certain percentage, so we have to ratchet it back. But I'm just asking if it just stated the unit price and didn't have that 250 number?
yes, because you have to identify an estimated number of units, which is how you get to the price. So there's really, that would still be an issue.
Otherwise, if you were
But
voting
wouldn't
on
you
it,
do the estimate after you've surveyed?
Well, we have done that in the past, and we have not done that in the past. This year, we did not. We used an estimate of past projects, which have always been relatively similarly in line.
I just wanted, for the new trustee, two trustees that are on the board, we did have a conversation the prior year on whether we wanted to put sidewalks onto the tax roll. And this may be something we want to reconsider at some point. I know staff special assessments are hard to administer. And as trustee Menta just mentioned, as you're getting up and as our tax, as our squeeze on our income levels here are happening and we're hearing from our residents, putting it on the tax roll spreads the cost out and you get hit with a $3,000 additional tax bill you weren't planning for. And so then you start doing terms and how many years can they pay us back and what's the interest rate. And but I personally, would love to reconsider that at some point. I think that putting it on the tax roll, at least, like alleys, this decision we made for alleys that year was, no, we want to put them on the tax roll because they're part of our transportation system, and then it spreads the cost out rather than getting hit with a $10,000 alley, special assessment. So we did that for alleys, but we did not, the board did not, they supported keeping special assessments. But I think with two new trustees, we may want to reconsider that at some point.
Sorry, just for clarification, I thought that's how, so you get the sidewalk assessment. I may be wrong, the impression that that's how you pay that is through your tax.
Yes, but there's two ways to do it. So a special assessment means you're paying for your squares.
Right.
Putting it on the tax roll means, say there's 250 squares that have to be replaced.
Yep.
It's spread out of the whole village, so your tax bill goes up smaller increments at a time, rather than being hit with a big bill every 10 years or however many years. So it's just spreading it out over time.
I think I can work with Mark and Rebecca, and we can certainly look for our next long-range discussion about opportunities or options for including that in that plan.
Okay, because I think that would help with the sidewalk shaving, because we pay for sidewalk shaving, it's almost a conflict of interest. It's like, oh, we'd rather just specialists, than using up our budget. But if they're both paid the same way, then we have an incentive to use sidewalk shaving, because now we're saving tax money by extending the payment.
Allison, if you actually go and look at what's been marked and walk it and talk to Joel or the engineer, the sidewalk shaving, it works for particular circumstances, and it's pretty clear when it would work and when it wouldn't. It also, I think if you, spend some time to really understand how it works and when it doesn't, then it wouldn't be so, that it will clarify some of this.
And I think we had that discussion when we adopted the rules for sidewalk shaving. Trustee McKay?
Is there a motion on the floor? I would like to make a motion to adoption of resolution 2019-11, a resolution related to the replacement of sidewalks and carriage walks in 2019.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We read it back and we will take a vote.
To approve resolution 2019-11 related to the replacement of sidewalks and carriage walks in 2019.
Okay.
Roll call vote.
Roll call.
Yep. Trustee McKay. Yes. Trustee Menta.
Aye.
Trustee Carpenter. Linder?
Aye.
Trustee Warren?
I,
President Rosing?
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is 9C, discuss public works organizational RFP follow-up.
I believe we were able to conclude this in the count, so this is just put on a placeholder. Well done.
It'll be reflected in our video, the whole minutes. So just for the public, it will be in the minutes from the committee of the whole. There was no vote taken or anything of that, just the discussion notes. Okay, thank you.
9D, consider trick or treat date and time for 2019.
Rebecca?
That is similar to what we've seen in the past, but Halloween this year falls on Thursday. The ghost training is going to have your annual celebration on Halloween from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Corner Bakery. The district is not doing a Halloween related event this year. And the Packer game was adopted last year, so I wanted to inform you that there is one on Sunday, October 27th at 7:20 p.m. In the past, this group has had discussions. We are part of the ICC, and they passed a resolution several,
Like 10 years ago?
Yep. In fact, the last year on the resolution is actually 2020.
I have some things to say about that.
So that resolution calls for ICC communities to have trick or treat on Sunday, October 27th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. I did not check with all of those communities, but I did consult with the Village of Whitefish Bay, and they'll be following the ICC resolution date and time. So really just wanted to gather some date check for you prior to the discussion tonight, and then looking forward to receiving your direction.
I just wanted to make a note at the ICC meeting. The former chair just turned over, but was Mayor Nitsky from Greenfield, am I saying that right? Greenfield. And he brought it up to the ICC's, the 19 members, and said, what is this resolution? And they all said, I don't know, we don't follow that. And I said, oh, well, it's a big thing in Shorewood. Could you please repeal it if you're not following it? Like, just, I mean, it would help us to be able to say, because nobody around the table even remembered it. So I just wanted to share that it's not, if the ICC who made it 10 years ago doesn't even know it exists or cares that it exists, that it might not be as, we need to follow it. I just want to share that. Trustee Carpenter.
So I think after the last Halloween discussion, I sent out, there's an article in Politico specifically about Milwaukee. It's a professor from Harvard Law School who lived in Milwaukee, was an attorney in Los Angeles, and talked about how basically racist the way that Milwaukee does Halloween. And it has been, for me personally, one of the most shocking things about living in this city. That Halloween is not done on Halloween like everywhere else in America, and it does not feel inclusive to me at all. And that article really was just really drove home that point for me, and it made me realize that this sentiment, I grew up in Los Angeles, and that, trick-or-treating was on Halloween, and I understand safety concerns, and I understand, but all of that, but we have this small window of time that we're basically saying to the rest of the city that you can come to our town. And I think if we said, you are welcome to come to our town on Halloween, and that's when we trick or treat, I think that says a lot for our community. And it's already happening. I mean, there are these tiny little neighborhoods, and they plant flags in the yards, and it's super exclusive. And you go on Halloween night in addition to the Sunday night trick or treating, and you look for. My kids literally are like, oh nope, that one doesn't have a flag. We have to skip that house and go to the next one. I mean, it's already
Tiny flag.
yeah. I mean, it's already happening, and it doesn't feel inclusive to me, and that's not what I think of about Shorewood. So I feel pretty passionate about having Halloween on Halloween.
Do you have hours? Does it matter what time?
I mean, I think, you do from like 4 to 7, or even 9 hours, but and the little kids go out at 4, well, it's still dusk and with their parents, and then, you know, older kids can go out later. You know, I know that the Ghost Train has their event on Halloween, at 6:30 to 8:30. But it just does not feel inclusive to me to not have Halloween on Halloween.
Just one.
I really appreciate Trustee Carpenter's sentiments, and Trustee Carpenter forwarded me that article last year, and I thought it was a really well thought out article. I mean, my thought on Halloween though was a little bit different. I've always found that, you know, during the day or even later afternoon on Sunday I've always felt like it allowed more people to come into the village and celebrate with us. I do understand that there are side celebrations going on, but I think if you place Halloween, you know, 4 to 7 on a weekday, it makes it very difficult for, it's a difficult time for a lot of people to get here and to go trick or treating. So I've always been partial to having it on a weekend during the afternoon, maybe even as the sun goes down. And that was kind of what I was thinking. That'd be where I was
Changing the hours rather than the day.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want it to be too late because I still want the little kids to be able to participate. So I'm usually partial to having it on that Sunday. I grew up here and I've always had it on that Sunday. So
Same as, so I agree with Trustee Carpenter. I think Halloween should be celebrated on Halloween, and I think I stated last year that I also think that it would be great if we could all come together and have the business improvement district, you know, if it's a time slot of daytime, you know, 3 to 7 or 4 to 6 or whatever that time slot is, right when the hour gets dusk, then when they're done, they can go to the Ghost Train or they can go to the business district and trick or treat. That's what we always did in Florida, and I felt like it was great because you had the mall participating back then when indoor malls were huge. But ours is a business district, and I think it would be beneficial. It will help the businesses because it'll bring them more, you know, they'll all be dressed up on the same night. The kids can come and have dinner after they trick or treat with their family, and everybody will be in costume. Not everyone, but it would blend together nicely. But I do think the time span needs to have some daytime hours and, you know, be after work so people can bring their young children out.
The only other thing I would add too about Halloween is that it is the second largest retail holiday now in
Yeah.
America. So, I mean, it's huge. You know, the only other holiday is Christmas that people spend more money on. So, you know, it is a major event in America. And so deciding what day people celebrate the holiday, not on the actual holiday, just seems weird to me. You know,
So, do you want to make a motion?
Sure, I move to move trick or treating to Thursday, October 31st, 2019, from 4 to 7.
Was it?
Yeah.
A second. Last year we talked about 3 hours, was it 3 hours or 4? I can't remember what was too long. And we had that full-on discussion and I can't remember what we resolved.
I think it was 3.
Was it, because I remember residents would send in emails and were saying that's too long of a time frame.
We did 4.
Did we do 4? We narrowed it to 3?
And the ICC one is 3.
I'm fine with 3. I just didn't know if there's any.
Last year we did it on Sunday, October 28th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.
2 hours, okay.
And that, I think that was in reaction.
Later.
I think it was later because of the panic.
I
No,
remember
it was
some.
during.
Or it was during?
It
It was
something
during.
like that.
Oh, no, it was bad.
Sorry.
But I think it was I think it was in relation if we went back because the residents had said 3 hours was a long time.
Okay.
But if it's on Halloween, I feel like it brings in the teens, the tweens that don't necessarily feel like they're too old to go on Sunday from 1 to 4 or whatever, but they really want to participate in holidays with the neighbors. And so because it's on Halloween, I think 3 hours would be in my preference. Because it can span over a longer period of time.
I mean, I also celebrated on Halloween growing up, but, you know, it's the Sunday before is the tradition here, and I'm going to vote to stay on Sunday just because people here really care about tradition, and I just feel but that's how, I mean, I agree with you, it seems weird, but it doesn't seem weird to people from Shorewood, so. Like, yeah,
Yeah, it's,
Yeah, it's the old, the new, same with parking regulations, I mean,
Yeah,
different
yeah.
perspectives. Trustee Moore?
I
And
was
then
just,
trustee McKay, I didn't see your hand.
I was gonna say, I definitely see the idea of moving it to Halloween. I like the general idea of it, but from 4 to 7, I'm gonna have to vote no, simply because, coming home from work and all those things, preparing dinner, I just think that that's gonna be a really tough trick or treat time. So I'm gonna, though I do appreciate moving it to Halloween, I do appreciate the sentiment expressed here, I'm gonna vote on the motion.
Can I just ask a clarification question for next year? If it was on Halloween but a different time, I just wanted to know, you had mentioned you appreciate being on Halloween, but those at hours were, just picking your brain.
Next year, it will be on Halloween, next year, 2020 is on the 31st.
Yeah, 2020.
And then what was-
Saturday.
If you have any thoughts on what time frame would be better, that,
Well, that's a Saturday.
oh,
Yeah, I mean, once you get to the weekend, I think that my concern, I just wanna make sure the younger kids can still get involved.
I mean, I would say for younger kids, like 1 to 4 is definitely not the ideal time. Like most young kids that are, are napping from 1 to 3, really young kids. So that is the other thing, like that 1 to 4 time slot as a parent to young children, they can't go. And you're like, don't ring my bell, please. So that's my other thought is that Sunday afternoon, if you have really young children, you can't really participate. It's right smack in the middle of nap time, so.
my only concern with, I went down, I did undercover Allison this Halloween, just to see what was going on last Halloween. And on Morris, because we have it on a different day than Halloween, I think it actually is more inclusive because Milwaukee celebrates Halloween on a different time frame. You get a lot of people that don't have conflicts. So we actually, Morris seemed very dangerous to me. I mean, I was very appreciative that there was all these kids and all that. I saw great participation from our residents on the stoops. But the traffic, I mean, they just would stop in the middle, straddle the middle line. It's not a safe environment. So if we're going to keep it, it's, I don't know if we put it in a transportation plan or what we need to do, but that to me was very scary. To see the kids darting across the streets and on Morris, and that's just one street that I went down that was pretty heavily populated. I think on Halloween we'd have less of that congestion because there's more things to attend on the holiday, and it just, I think you get, my personal opinion is you would see more residents as well, mixing with outside people choosing to come.
Yeah, but 4 to 7 is right in the middle of rush hour on a Thursday. There's a lot of people coming home from work, so you have the rush hour traffic and the Halloween traffic, and yeah. And I think that's a disadvantage of doing it during the week.
Trustee McKay, did you have anything?
I'm gonna vote against it. I too appreciate the sentiment, and I understand tradition on both ways. I think I've heard more veiled racist comments about moving it off Sunday to prevent people from coming into town, and it's too accessible, and I'm uncomfortable, trying to, I'm uncomfortable both ways. I think there are race issues in general with our town. So I don't think that moving it is a solution to that, and I do think that 4 to 6 on Sunday is an accessible time for a variety of people for a variety of ways.
Is there a way I know the motion's on the table, maybe to amend the motion, or if it fails to put in another motion, but that we refer it to HRC at some point over the next year before it comes back to us next year, because I think that would be the great place to have that discussion about race, and I mean, I know it's swirling around all the time, as Trustee McKay said, and is it more racist? So I think because we have the same discussion every year, that maybe we just want assistance and more input from the committee that's formed for that reason, the commission. Trustee Warren?
I think that's a great idea. I think that here, we've had a good discussion here, but I feel like there's a lot of these themes that we'd probably like to explore more deeply. And just in the context of these village board meetings, we just don't have the time to do that. I think HRC is the perfect spot for, all of us have our
Holiday
opinions.
celebrations.
And we can kind of flush, HRC can help to flush out kind of those opinions and gather facts, so I like the idea.
And make a recommendation. Just, it would be helpful to have some other body helping us, assist us gathering that input.
Yep.
So, do you want to amend?
Could we just take this?
We could just take
We
this
can,
vote.
it sounds like it's gonna fail, right? So, okay, so we have a motion, you read?
Yep, to hold trick or treat for 2019 on Thursday, October 31st from 4 to 7 p.m.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion fails, 2-3. Does anyone want to make a motion on the floor?
Make a motion to hold trick or treat on Sunday, the 27th, is it?
Yes.
From 4 to 6 p.m., 2019.
Second.
And refer, do you want to?
And refer to the Human Relations Council for consideration of 2020,
Recommendation.
a recommendation for the 2020 consideration.
Well, I mean, 2020 is already on the 31st, so.
2021.
Future.
For future years.
For future holidays,
Yeah.
including Halloween, second. So,
Yeah, second.
Yes.
I just have one question. So the Village of Whitefish Bay is doing it from 1 to 4. Did you say 4 to 6?
what was it last year?
Last year was, I believe it was 4 to 6.
And
And Whitefish Bay was also at 1 to 4 last year.
So I mean, I think that's also like part of the craziness is like people literally go from Whitefish Bay to Shorewood and like then you have all, people in cars that are driving. So that's my only question is like, do we just do it at the same time as Whitefish Bay? Especially knowing that there is a Packers game on at that exact time, right? Or that
It's a little bit later.
sorry. That's, like, or is, do we want to, that's my only
I
question.
agree.
We could just take this, well, let's see how it goes, and then you could,
Unless you want
Unless
to
you
amend
want-
it,
yeah.
Here, could we amend it?
make amendment motion.
I move to amend the time for trick or treating to 1 to 4.
Second.
Okay. We'll take a vote on that?
Yep, any further discussion? Okay, so, go ahead, we'll take
Amendment is to move the trick or treat time from 1 to 4 p.m.
on.
October 27th, Sunday.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried, amendment carries 3-2. Now can you read the amended motion?
To hold trick or treat on Sunday, October 27th from 1 to 4 p.m. and to refer to the Human Relations Commission for future holidays.
For recommendation
For recommendation.
on future holidays.
I mean, I probably should have said this before we voted on the amendment, but I thought we moved to 4 to 6 last year to give, to have both some light time for little kids and some dark time for big kids, and we're not interested in that anymore.
Personally, I'm not, because what I saw was a dangerous situation in as it was getting to be dusk, so, and I think Trustee Carpenter, in my personal opinion, is to alleviate that problem, would have trick-or-treating with your neighborhoods the same time, so you're not hopping in a car from one community to the other,
But you guys were in favor of nighttime trick-or-treating on Halloween.
yes, and I
But
still
you're
would
not in
be,
favor of nighttime trick-or-treating on the 27th.
only because nighttime trick-or-treating is also consistent with other municipalities like the city of Milwaukee, so then, again, that alleviates the